Hello, I'm Adam Orth. Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook. Today I'm speaking with Double Dagger Studio director Matt Wood and animator Micah Breitweiser about their runaway hit, Little Kitty, Big City. In this episode, we discuss the process of bringing Little Kitty to life and making sure it was a character and not just a cat, making an entire game about side quests, Micah's jump to animating for video games from advertising, how a comment from Matt's dad set him on the path to an incredible game development career, the benefits of bringing non-developer skill sets into the game development environment, and how Little Kitty Big City began as a teaching session between a father and his children and ended up a viral hit. Hope you enjoy. Hey Matt, hey Micah, welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook.
Hey, glad to be here.
Hello.
Glad to have you guys here today to talk about your awesome new game, Little Kitty Big City. I have a slightly interesting story about when and how I played it. I don't know when this is going to air, but this is only a few days after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, and I played your game to escape all of that, and it was an incredible respite from the world that we're living in right now. And I really, really loved it and appreciate that I could have it at that time. It's a really wonderful game, and want to talk a lot about that today, obviously. But I wanted to get a little background for our users on both of you. Matt, you've been a game developer for a bunch of years. You're currently the studio director at your own studio, Double Dagger Studio, but you've spent a lot of time at amazing kind of groundbreaking studios like 3D Realms and Valve. You've also had a hand in kind of helping make some of the most iconic games in video game history. I'll just go through a quick list: Duke Nukem Forever, Max Payne, Counter-Strike, Half-Life 2, a bunch of episodes of those, a bunch of Left 4 Dead, Alien Swarm, Portal 2, Counter-Strike, Destinations VR, a lot of incredible stuff at Valve. Micah, can you kind of give us a little bit of background on your history in game development?
Sure. This will be brief because I haven't been here long. This is my first game project.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I went to animation school. After I graduated, I started doing advertising. So I was animating on ads and stuff like that. Good way to just like cut your teeth, I guess, and get into the industry. And then I ended up quitting that job because I didn't really enjoy it that much, and I found Little Kitty Big City pretty much right after that. And that was in 2020. So my game dev career is 4 years long, and it's on Little Kitty Big City. And yeah, that's what I'm bringing to the table today.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
you
a
you
hell.
wouldn't you wouldn't think that in my
Yeah,
opinion.
no,
Yeah,
definitely not at all. Animations specifically are a huge part of this game, and there's a lot to talk about there. So, were you always interested in making video games, or like how did that happen?
Yeah, I think I did pivot a little bit because originally I was kind of thinking of myself more as like a feature film animator. But when I was a kid, I was always interested in video games. I played them all the time. I loved them, especially games with animals in them. Those were always my favorites. So it was like a little bit of a pivot, but it ended up being a great fit, I think. So yeah, it worked out.
Was there like a specific game or moment that kind of lit the creative spark for you to think that, oh, I can really put myself into this and have a career in this? It's interesting because um, your your animations in the game are like incredible. They're
Well,
really
thank
good,
you. Thank you so
and
much.
it's much more than just animating a cat. It's like, you know you've delivered a character in a way that is really really cool, and I'm just curious if there was a moment in your life where kind of a light switch flicked on. You're like, oh hey, this might be something for me.
Yeah, I don't. That's an interesting question. Thank you first of all for all those nice things that you said about the animation in the game. I think probably just my general love for animals is probably where that comes from. I think one of my favorite things about animals is that they don't have that level of language and higher thinking, but they are very complicated little individuals in their own way. And the only way you can really like get that from them is just by watching them move, because they don't have the facial expression, they don't have speech, but they do so much with their bodies to tell you how they're feeling and what they're thinking. And I was always interested in that, I think, just because I loved animals. I loved having pets and just watching them crawl around and play together. And I used to be into horseback riding too when I was younger, which is a very sort of wait and observe kind of practice. Like you have to kind of like watch what they're doing and sort of learn how they operate, and then take that knowledge and like try to work with them from there. So I think there's like different little things that probably contributed to it, but overall just enjoying like watching how they move and um, how their movement expresses what they're thinking. It's just very interesting to me, and it always has been.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've been told this a bunch while making this game, but like, you know, you basically started making the hardest thing. The quadruped is like so hard to do in game development and have it done right. So super kudos to that because
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Yeah,
yeah.
lucky for me, I didn't know that it was hard. So I didn't have any idea that this was any more difficult than any other way of doing things. So
Yeah, when it's your first time, it's the baseline. So now everything's going to be easy after this, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And also, you know, you don't know any better, so you just go for the gold, right? On the first time like that. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, Matt. So kind of same question to you. Obviously, a lot more experience and having done a bunch, but like, you know, I am really interested in kind of how the journey starts for you. Like, you know, maybe as far back as childhood. A lot of people I talk to seem to have um, something big happens to them around 10 or like around 10 years old where um, it kind of somehow plots out their life. I'm no different. um, Curious how that spark ignited for you.
Yeah. um, Man, what happened around 10? So
It
the
doesn't
thing
have
for
to be
me
10,
is
it could
no, I
be
know. But it's interesting you say that, because that's probably around where things did happen. Um, I mean, I had video games in my life, probably my whole life. I mean, I don't know who it was, but somebody had a Pong system that was in my grandmother's house for a little while. I don't know whose it was because it was there temporarily. But between that and the old Atari systems and Nintendo, Super Nintendo, all that stuff, I always had something around, whether it was a neighbor's or my place. Um, and at that point, you don't think about the development part of the game. You just, you're just a consumer. You just play it, and you don't really know much or care much about how it's made. But then my neighbor had an Atari 800, I think, computer, and she would get these magazines where they would include the full source code for some really small game, right? I don't know if anybody remembers this, but so you would subscribe to the magazine, they'd ship it to you, and it's the full source code, and you would just sit down and you'd type it all in. And then that was how they would distribute the game. But I mean, the cool part is, as a result, you get to see all the source code. And the first time I did that, I was like, I don't know. So I think that's maybe the point where something kind of clicked, right? And you're like, oh, like I can do this if I wanted to, and you start sort of changing lines and experimenting with different things. And once, I don't know, once I had that power, it was like, this is actually something you can do. Um, but it wasn't until I was like probably in late high school or similar, where um, my dad said to me some point, he mentioned something along the lines of like, oh, you remember those old Infocom games you used to play? And I said, yeah. And he said, um, the guys that made those, they were like, 20 or maybe just a year or two older than you are now. And for some reason, that kind of like did something to my brain that said, because when you're a kid and you sort of put people on pedestals, they're just kind of far away and everything exists kind of out of your reach. For me, it did, right? So you just see it as like, those people are awesome. I'm not, I can't associate with those people. But for some reason, that age thing where I went, oh, they did that when they were young. Like I could totally do that too. And I think that was probably the actual switch that went from, this is something that exists, to this is something I could actually do. Um, and then, and then after that point, it was like, Duke Nukem 3D came out. Doom first, but Duke Nukem 3D was the one who had the good editor. And I just started making levels in Duke Nukem and Dark Forces and old Doom levels. And I think that was how I spent my whole summer in like 90, I don't know, 97, 98 or something. Just the whole summer was just made dozens of maps. And yeah, and then I applied to 3D Realms because they were looking for a level designer for Prey, and I sent them some maps, and they hired me, and that was kind of it. It went from just a fun hobby to, what the heck, I'll apply, see what they think, and then they hired me, and then like a week later, I drove down to Texas with my my computer in the back and not much else. Yeah, I didn't. I mean, it was. I think I was 20 at the time, and had no idea what I was doing. Didn't know, what I was going to do when I got there.
So
I just was so excited.
How old were you in 1980, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, 3 or 4, 3 and 4.
Okay, yeah, so it seems like everyone I talk to who has like 20 plus years in game development and that kind of 10-year-old mark I was talking about earlier seems to happen around, sometime between 1980 and 1985. And it seems like there's a big correlation with people like yourself who, I just applied for a job with some modding experience, and all of a sudden I'm working on Duke Nukem, and then you have this whole career, and then now you're making this kind of, I'll call it a passion project, your own game, but a lot of the seed of that seems to start at this kind of advent of the weirdness around computers and games, and how like how exciting of a time that was, because there were no rules and there were no competing 3D engines, and this is how we make everything now, because that's how we've done it for the last 30 or 40 years. And I find that the people who are doing really creative work and have these long, you know, we're the graybeards essentially,
Hmm.
have this kind of genesis around that time. You talked about typing all the code in, and how that's actually how you got to see it in its full form in the beginning, and how that maybe probably still informs you today about how you do that stuff. And I just think it's a really interesting um, little time capsule that I think has a lot more to do with the game industry today than we give it credit for. And
I
just
think, I mean, yeah, my thoughts on that. I mean, obviously, the industry's changed quite a bit back then. I mean, when all of us were getting started, there was no template, there were no classes, there were no, nothing to prepare anybody for any of this stuff. Um, so for me, and others like me, it was just how, most of my friends and people who got into the industry, their introduction was through modding tools of
mhm.
somebody's. And the modding communities back then, in, I'm going to say like the early 90s, because that's what I'm the most familiar with. But there nobody had any aspirations of getting a job at that time. It was just everybody was creating for creation's sake, right? I
Yep.
mean, it was, I have something interesting I want to do, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to share it with as many people who will consume it. And that's, it was magical in that time where there, everybody was doing it because they wanted to. They were all doing it because they had something to share, and interesting ideas to develop. And so as a result, you got so much stuff. Like I look back at like the Quake 1 modding days of, what did Quake come out in, like 96, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
Within like a year or two after that, like it was insane. It's like, I would argue most of the people my age who were even remotely aware of those modding days have been influenced in some way or another with what they're working on now based on stuff back then. People just, they had no idea what they were doing. They were just messing around, and all this amazing stuff came out of it. And it's hard to find that, like, an equivalent these days where, I mean, times are a little bit tougher as well, but also, it's tough to, find a group that's just like, I just want to create because I want to create. I mean, they still exist, but it's not as big of a group as it used to be. So it's different. It's really different.
Yeah, it's
I
I mean it's very like, you know, that kind of group that you're talking about, it was spurned on by creativity, and it wasn't like I must get a job and create games at a place. It was like, man, I'm doing this and I love this, check it out. And that just kind of snowballs,
right.
into stuff like that. A lot of people I've talked to on this podcast who, you know, have done incredible things, like it was never like this like burning focus, because I don't think that burning focus really existed back then, because you didn't really know,
Well, these are all
right?
hobbies, right? I mean,
Yeah, like
all of
I
my
got
friends
into
were,
game development completely by accident, even though I've been a gamer my entire life.
yeah.
And it wasn't because, oh, I got to go do this. It was because a time and a place and a creative thing all lined up at a place, and here I am all these years later, like yourself, like just, kind of like still running on that gas. It's just interesting.
Yeah, and back when, the first job that I was hired at, so I was delivering pizzas at the time, when I got hired, and all the other level designers at that time. You know, one was an engineer at um, what's it? Not Boeing, but something equivalent. You know, another one was a DJ, right? And you know, another one was, you know, he worked at a bank or something, right? And it's like that's who we were hiring. It's like these were
Yeah.
just all people who had day jobs and did all this stuff in the evenings, you know, and then that's how we hired them.
It's
I
so
don't think
interesting. Sorry, I mean to step on you. It's so
that's okay.
interesting that you say that, because I had that same experience in the early days where it was like all these weirdos coming in from different places to like do this other thing, and they bring all that with them. And
Hmm.
you know, it was very it added to the soup that went into the game. You know, it was really interesting how that all happened.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's a good point too. Is that yeah? I mean, everybody was bringing in this different set of skills and experiences, and you know, it was very broad back then. Yeah.
and it's
That's,
weird because that doesn't really happen today unless someone goes, let's bring in some non-game people and
hmm.
mix it up and
Yeah,
see how that happens, right? And it's
and I
like,
still think
well, that's how it started.
yeah, and I still think that that's, you know, I think that's super valuable, and I think that like more game devs should be doing stuff. Not, you know, not, you know, I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice, but I think, you know, finding people who don't have experience in games to come work on your game, that can bring outside experience, like that's sometimes more valuable than them being able to, you know, ramp up on the tools that you have super quickly. Like, who gives a crap? Can I swear on
Thousand
this
percent agree.
podcast?
Yeah, you can swear like crazy here.
Okay.
1000% agree with that. Like the diversity of skill set, not like diversity, you know, who you are and where you come from, but it's like, you know, adding an outside perspective to making games and interactive experiences is critically important. I'm all for that. I love it. It's really important.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so let's let's talk about. So you spent a bunch of time at Valve working on you know, all of these incredible games, and I feel like I see a lot of that in your current game. I feel like I see a lot of um, really good, smart design that I associate with um, the excellence that I see in Valve games. Um, it feels like there's a DNA from that in your game, and so I guess we've done all the history stuff. We can just start talking about the game now. Um, I kind of
I appreciate that though. That's a really nice thing.
well,
Thank you.
it's true. I mean, and I have a very long list of things that I enjoyed and noticed about the game, and hopefully we can touch on some of those. Probably not all of them because nobody has that much time. Um, but so if I can just do a little timeline about how this game kind of came into focus. I've done a bunch of research about, you know, how you were noodling around with prototypes and doing stuff with your kids, and um, that all kind of coalesced into you put out a little video in a tweet that went viral,
Yeah.
and that was kind of the seed that led to where we are now. But like, run me through like what was going on at home and how that video happened, and then how it jumped off.
Yeah. I mean, this was around. I have to keep remembering, but like, I think I left Valve in 2019. Is that right? Um, and so, you know, I was looking to do something different and something, you know, that I was more personally interested in and had more challenges with. And but I didn't know what it was. I didn't leave with any intent or any ideas. It was just all right. I'm going to figure it out. And in that process, which is something I have to admit is not a thing that I have a lot of experience with, because if you look at all those projects that I worked on, the vast majority of ones where I was the person who helped finish the product or helped develop it in the middle and then ship it. And there were a few cases where I worked on it in the beginning, but not enough that I felt really confident. So this was a whole new thing for me. So like I struggled with, starting something for a while, and just I had a bunch of ideas, but it was hard to coalesce them. And so I started to kind of pivot and wanted to spend more time with my kids. And so I started to just like, well, let's do some little programming sessions and some little game design things, and teach them some things that I know. And we just focused on that for a little while. We made some really neat little prototypes of things. And yeah, I'm one of those in the sessions. I've told the story a lot now, but like, it really was just somebody was like, what if you played as a cat? And as at its surface, right, you're like, well, cool, yeah. Well, what if you play as a cat? Who cares, right? What is the game, right? But for some reason, when that occurred to me, I hadn't thought of any game like that, and it suddenly sort of popped into my head that like that sounds really interesting, because I don't know of anything that I've played that I enjoyed that where you just played as a cat. So that's when I just mocked it up, because I was really I was sort of rebelling a little bit on how I would work at Valve and justifying all of my actions like at a the minute detail, and I wanted to just go and try to figure out, is something interesting just because I find it interesting? Is it interesting because like the vibe of it makes me feel good? It makes me want to ask questions, and and it makes somebody else feel good as well. I was intentionally trying to keep it really loose and not define it, because I was like, this is a feeling thing. This is about feeling. And I did the mock up, and I was really happy with it. It was super simple. And I was using everybody else's assets, right? Like stuff you buy on the asset store. I didn't make anything hardly. And just made a little video for fun, because I thought it was such a cool idea, not thinking anything of it, honestly. And it was the first time I had ever experienced like something going viral. And now, granted, like to me, viral back then was, I don't know, it got like 5,000 likes or something, right? Or I don't remember. I have to go back and look, but like it was like not that much, but to me it was really big. And then that's when I realized that was something that people really they would be interested in. And so at that point I'm like, well, yeah, duh, it's cats and this is the internet, right? Like, wow. Of course. But yeah, I at that point I just had to figure out what the game was, right? And the hard work actually began, because once you have an idea is like 0.1% of what it is that you're trying to do. The execution is the hard part. So so I had to figure out what it is that the player's going to do, and I spent a long time on that, just figuring it out. But what I did know was that the main focus of the game was going to be about the cat itself. And I didn't know how much I wanted to do until I hired Micah, and then it became obvious that we definitely needed to do more stuff that required animation, right? That would show off the character and the movements, and really kind of make people feel like it was a cat and it wasn't just a character.
That's a good point. Let me put a pin in that for a second, because I want to ask Micah a question.
Okay.
It's not weird that I got the tweet. It's pretty easy for game developers to get that. But Micah, were you aware of what was happening like before you even kind of hooked up and said, "Oh, let's do this together"?
Not too much. I did. I think the first thing I saw was the tweet that Matt put out where he was calling for animators. Um, that was the first thing I ever saw from Little Kitty Big City. And then I went through the page because I was looking for work at the time, and I went through like the social media homepage, and I was like, oh, this looks like really cute. And then I was also like, I can do that. So um, yeah, I needed work at the time, and that's when we like, I reached out and sent him a DM, sent him my reel, and that's how we kind of linked up. And then after we linked up, it was still pretty chill in the beginning. It was like Matt was kind of like, yeah, just I have this asset. I want to replace the movements with some custom made stuff. Maybe we can start with that. And I was like, yeah, okay. So it was still kind of like a slow start, I think. And I definitely wasn't aware of how big it was going to get when I joined. That was always just an ongoing surprise, and I'm still surprised. So yeah, that's just been a through line for the whole project.
Does
Yeah.
that count in when you say big? Does that count in the size of the project and the success, or what does that mean for you?
I guess I'm talking about the success. I guess I knew that it got a lot of attention on social media, but I was kind of like, I wanted to be a little savvy about it, where I was like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's going to translate to sales. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was kind of like, well, likes, or anyone can like anything as they're scrolling. It's very passive. I didn't realize that it was going to be something that people really loved, and like it became something that was going to be beloved to people. And when I realized that, this is before we shipped, when I started to like catch on to that, I really like put everything I had into the project at that point because it just became so special. So yeah.
All right, so Destiny, the tweets worked. You guys are
Yeah.
you guys are connected. Um, you've got this idea. Take me kind of through um, seeing it as a bigger thing, and you know how you started and what you turned out with.
Yeah, I mean, the process itself was intentionally very evolutionary, right? It was intentionally very iterative because um, because it started with just that seed of an idea. I spent most of the development time just building on top of other things that worked and throwing things that didn't work, and so there was never a point. There were a couple of points where I had to sort of do some overview stuff to hire a writer, so people didn't come into the project and going like, what the hell are you doing, had to show some coordination and competence, but for the most part it was like super iterative. So that's why it was more chill at the beginning, because I didn't know what animations. It's like we needed some animations to make it work, and then beyond that, I didn't know. Like I wanted to let the gameplay drive it, and sometimes there were cases of like Micah would do an animation, and I don't even remember why. Sometimes you would do ones that you're just like, oh, I just did this one, it was really cool, and then
Yeah.
and then no, and I'm so thankful that happened, because those are the times when I went, okay, now we need to justify this existing in the game, right? And like in a good way.
Yeah.
So we figured out how to get them in, and those were the moments that like where things became more special, right? They became more um, where we were able to kind of develop that more character and those personal touches. But I think that was the key to a lot of it, was just being super flexible and open about development, which also meant that like deadlines were really hard, especially near the end. I hate deadlines. I mean, who doesn't? Um, but yeah, we iterated on stuff up until, I don't know, like, what would you say, Micah? The last 6 months is when we were finally
Oh
like
yeah.
locking down, maybe. I'm not even
Yeah.
sure,
It
but
it was it was iterative even in the last year of development. We were still kind of doing experiments. Um,
yeah,
yeah, very very open in terms of process, which I think was definitely awesome.
But it's also, you know, a lot of it had to do with the team size as well. Um, Micah and I were the only two full people working on the project full time, and then everyone else was part time, and so we get their times sometimes intermittently. So it was harder to create longer term plans without, you know, knowing we would have the work.
So because of that, did you have did you have any, like, for lack of a better term, like, gameplay pillars that had to be met, that were easy for people coming in like part-time chunks to understand it right away and really know, like, where the project was going?
Yeah, the ones again, it's like my pillars were made of clay, uh, a little bit, which isn't like the best advice for you know every other developer out there, uh, but I mean there were some core things at the beginning that I really wanted to maintain, which was, you know, and I don't even know the right way to distill this, but I mean giving the player the sense of a real cat, right? So this is I want to be able to invoke those same feelings that people get when they watch cat videos, right? Like that was super duper important even from the beginning. Um, a sense of exploration was a really important part, and a sense of play, like those were all important. So everything kind of revolved around those at every iteration of the game, and the play part was the hardest because it's so open ended for from the design perspective, right? There's so many things that need to kind of coalesce to just make it feel like you can, you know, just play and um, not feel like there's structure around it, right? That's sort of forcing you to do certain things. But unfortunately, sometimes you kind of have to do that structure to create systems which then facilitate the play for the player, um, which is a very it's the first time I've done this sort of design, so it was this discovery process of, well, we could come up with a bunch of ideas for things that you could do as a cat, and that might be a fun thing to do. But then, you know, those all become sort of these islands of individual things that maybe don't, you know, coordinate very well together. So we kind of had to come at it from the other way and then go back and then come at it the other way and then go back. And so we did that a few times where we would just create stuff and then we get everybody on the team together and be like, you know, okay, well, this sucks. What else sucks? Well, you know, what else is really cool, and how do we push those and then add more structure on top? I don't know. This is one of those things where in the design process, we made it work, and then after the fact, now I have to go back and go like, what were the key elements that actually made it work for us? um,
Well, it's interesting because when I mentioned earlier, I see a lot of, like, the Valve DNA
yeah.
in your game. Um, One of the things that I associate with Valve and the design excellence that comes out of that place is knowing when to stop and restraint. Like, so easy. This game could have had so many more things, and it didn't need any of them, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, it's a perfect, like, design statement, I think, in the context of your game, because you're saying, you know, I don't need this. This is enough. And these things that are already in here are actually really meaningfully there for a reason. And I'll give you an example. Um, the ivy climbing system, right? Like,
Hmm.
okay, it's a climbing mechanic. Yeah, but guess what? That's the entire goal of the game, is to get back home. So, like, you know, the only thing the players are really, not the only thing, but the main thing the players are concentrating on is getting back up to that house. And you've got this really interesting system. And again, ivy climbing in video games is not a new thing. However, I think you did it in a really interesting way with the system growth tied to the fish, and also that tied into the game growing vertically over time in terms of level design and experientially. So that kind of really smart game design, I mean, you must have by osmosis or doing it, at Valve, and also, not just being at Valve, but obviously being a smart game designer yourself, like that must have been like at the core of what you wanted to do the whole time,
Yeah.
because it's very on purpose, but in a way that doesn't feel designery.
Thank you for saying all those things. That the part of my problem when it comes to talking about these design things is that sometimes I do, a lot of this stuff ends up happening in my head, which is why I work the way I do a lot of the times. And I'm just waiting for the moment when somebody's going to be really annoyed that I haven't communicated all of the things that are in my head, because sometimes I think I do and I don't. So a lot of that happens, and a lot of this stuff was being thought about throughout the whole development process. I mean, I've always been the type of, not just in design of games, but just in general, like I subscribe to the idea that, not that I strive for perfection necessarily, but like, perfection is not when you can, when there's nothing else to add, but there's nothing else to take away. Right. So like, I'm very much I like the idea of, if something exists, it better exist for a reason. Right.
Yeah.
And if something exists and there's no discernible reason for it to exist, whether it's, in some cases it's just like, well, this exists because people really, really enjoy it. Right. And sometimes that's enough, but I think in most cases, like I want things to be really trim and slim, not just because I think it makes a good game, but from the design perspective, I'm not a big chess player. I'm not a big RTS player. And I think, when it comes to holding design in my head or even on paper, right? Like once it gets too complicated, I just sort of zone out, like I just don't, I don't know, like I'm not as interested. Like I like simple, design structures, and, I just think they're more enjoyable.
I read an interview with you. I'm gonna give you a quote from one of your interviews.
Please do. I probably don't remember.
I find that when I play RPGs, I never do the main quests and just meander around, letting myself get distracted by all the side quests and activities, exploring and doing everything, but the thing I'm supposed to be doing is what makes me happy. I'm one of those guys too. I always save the quest for last, if I even get to it. And, that quote tracks with what you're saying right now.
There's another thing that happened during development that was not planned, obviously, but so I'm in my late 40s, and I got diagnosed with ADHD like last year. Okay, and so late diagnosis kind of thing, and researching that and what that actually meant, and how I think and how my brain thinks, or people with ADHD think with my type, things became a lot more obvious, and I started to talk to more people on my team, and realized that, I don't know, Micah, is it like 100% at this point that all have?
I mean, it's darn close. It's darn close. Yeah.
And it was just sort of how, you work with people.
Wait, you're saying everyone on your team has that?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, probably the vast majority. Everybody I know of who's admitted to it. Yeah. So
okay, we're getting deep today. I've never encountered that before, or maybe I have. Maybe it's just normal.
So here's the thing: is that like now that I know what this is, because when I grew up, it was something, my perception of it was completely different. And now that I know what this actually is, and how people with it think and how they work, I'm pretty sure most of the developers that I've worked with in my career that I've gotten along with also have it, just undiagnosed. It's just a really common thing in our industry, and I think people with it sort of get attracted to this style of working, right?
Mhm.
Now, once you're in a game dev where everything is much more structured and managed and, planned out or whatever, then all those people are gonna, hit the road. But in this particular environment with the smaller teams and, the ability to be agile and kind of change jobs and find new interests and grow, and that's all. It's super valuable for people like Micah and I and some of the other people on the team, I think. But so this is relevant, I promise. So finding this out.
This is why we're doing this, to hear stuff like this. I'm not here to like tell us about the trailer that you made.
Right.
This is like real stories of game development. So,
but after learning about it, it was a pretty big pivot in my life in general, right? But I did learn a lot about it, and what I learned is that we were making a game that was very much a product of the fact that everybody on the team had ADHD. It's very much so even before this diagnosis, I did sort of think about the game and talk to the team as a game about side quests. It was a game about distractions. It was a game about, from halfway through development, right? Like I wanted to make the main goal of the game. Well, originally the main goal of the game was like, you could do that within 10 minutes, right? And then, but that wasn't the point of the game. Like I wanted to do this weird thing of like, yeah, you could finish the game in 10 minutes, right? But like the game is actually everything else. And that's going to take you 5, 6, 7 hours to complete all that.
Yeah.
And what I realized,
I'm probably like 4 hours in, have not finished it yet.
That's awesome.
Because I don't want to.
Yeah.
See?
I mean, no, that's good. That's good. And then once I realized that like, I think there are too many players that sort of gauge games based on like their completion time, right? So it's like when I finish the game, and it still happens now, unfortunately, but so it did sort of force me to create more structure around, getting home was a little bit more than just going right away. But the main idea of making the vast majority of the game just be, side quests or distractions or things that you could run into. And, I wanted to do a whole lot more, but time, is a factor. And hopefully we'll get to it someday. But that was, it was an interesting thing that like, we started in that direction, and I started that direction as far as the design and what I wanted to do with the game. And then suddenly had this, I don't know if it's justification or what, but suddenly had this sort of explanation for why I found that so appealing. Because I was just doing things that, well, not that just I like. I mean, this is a separate topic altogether, but like I always want to make sure that like if I'm doing something that I enjoy, it also has a cross section with it's marketable as well. But for the most part, I'm doing things that I appeal to me and is something that I have some familiarity with and can act on and talk about, right? And so the whole side quest idea of I don't do main quests. Like I don't want the game to end. I want to explore and find, like exploration is such an important part of me. Like finding new things and meeting new people, discovering new items, all of that stuff is way more valuable to me than achievements or achievement. Yeah. And completion. Like I don't care about that. I mean, the value that I get is, learning and challenge, and which is exactly how I live my life too. Apparently, it's like I don't like I don't want trophies. This is apparently, I just got an email this morning about, like this is a award season or something, right? And I'm just like, fuck, I don't want to do that. I mean,
Yeah,
I
but you have
should.
to, though. You have
I
to.
should, right? But
Yeah.
it's like, and yeah, but it's not what I care less about that, like truly, than I do about like the other stuff that I talked about.
Well, here's a good example of that in your game, so we can get off awards. Not that you don't deserve them, just they're less interesting than what we're talking about here. So the soccer ball was cool for me because I just discovered it and then I saw a goal. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That's fun. But then I met the dog who lost all his tennis balls.
Mhm.
Right. And like that just little fun activity that didn't really mean anything other than just here's a ball and a goal. Right. It was super meaningful later on when I had to find those tennis balls and do that. And it just felt very like it was nice that I discovered it in that order. I didn't have to, but I did. I think most people probably do based on the way you've designed it, but that was just a nice little aha moment. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with um, the design choices, because there's all these little nice little, they're not these big overt things that you see in, like, let's face it, a lot of big AAA games, because you have to do those big sweeping things, but like they're just these nice little um, discoveries and callbacks that felt really nice. And I wanted to ask Micah, um, you know, I don't really know what your any experience with game design or thinking about game design is. Um, Again, last minute addition to the podcast. Super psyched that you're here because it's turned out really different than usual and I'm loving it. But like, what did you learn about game design working with him making this game? And how did that apply to your animation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the big takeaway for me was intrinsic rewards. Um, because, that that's part of the bread and butter of this game. There's so many little distractions and things to do, but like you don't really do them, like Matt was saying, to get the trophy. There's no goal, your cat doesn't get faster or stronger, or you don't have to defeat any boss. The reason you do them is just because it's enjoyable to do. So I think a lot of the work that I did with Matt, just going back and forth, was like, how do we make this feel like something that is like so appealing and so fun to just do? Um, and I think there's a lot of things that we got right in that area. I think um, I always think about like hopping in the cardboard boxes. I think that's something that turned out so nice in the game, just because we went back and forth and just figured out like this doesn't really have a gameplay function, but it's just really cute and it's really fun, and you get an intrinsic reward just sort of watching it play out as a reaction to like your button inputs. And I think stuff like that was really valuable for me. Yeah, and like you were saying with tennis balls and soccer goals and stuff like that too, it's like not necessarily why is this in here and where is it going? It's more like how do we just create that sense of fun, because that's a feeling, and I think in some ways that's a little bit harder, but
Oh, it's
I'm
way
so
harder.
glad that I was able. Yeah, I'm so glad that I was able to have that experience and like have that takeaway, because it definitely changed how I think about the other games that I play now. When I'm doing
Yeah,
side
because
quests on like the new stuff, I'm like, why am I doing this? Am I enjoying this? So yeah.
well,
I
it's interesting because when you, again, going back to the soccer ball, is like when you get like a first person game and there's like, oh, there's a basketball and a hoop, and it's like, okay, all right, like, but like the ball is intrinsic to the cat, right?
Mhm.
Everybody knows how that works. and it just felt really, you know, kind of like you're able to take advantage of stars aligning there, and you know, combining a cat and a ball, that's not a giant leap to, no pun intended, to understand, you know, how those mechanics could be interesting to work with.
And so a lot of this comes from, and I don't know if this ended up being an ADHD thing or not, but um, you know, I hate being told what to do. And there's a lot of modern games, I think, that they have characters or UI or systems or something where they not only hold your hand, but they, grab you by the nostril and drag you through, the thing that they want you to do, whether you like it or not. And I really hate it. Like, I
Yeah, and a
really,
lot
really
of
hate it.
times those things are things that don't even really add much to the game.
Exactly. Somebody
Right.
said this is a thing that we want the player to do. How do we get them to do it? Well, we create a quest and a
Right.
character and do all this stuff to make them do it. And it's like, well, but why? Like,
Well, but even more bitter and negative is that a lot of those things are created because, oh, we have 300 people on our team, so let's do something.
that's a good
Right.
point. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we did come out of the fact that, like, we had to be conscious of the time that we spent working on something, right? We had to be smart in the decisions we made and not waste our time. But yeah, like, there was a conscious decision to not direct the player as, or direct the player as little as possible, essentially, right? And if we're going to direct the player, do it as much as you can through level design. Do as much as you can through, where we place the interactions and the order in which we place the interactions. But I didn't want UI, right, that wasn't super obvious, and if it was, then it would go away, right? And I took a lot of those lessons from, honestly, a lot of Nintendo games work like this, like the Mario's and Zeldas. There's a lot of stuff that they do that's very similar that I was super inspired by. Especially the more modern Mario games where there's a lot more play, like Mario Odyssey. Mario Odyssey is just such an amazing game. Like, some of the design in those levels, they do all the stuff that you're talking about, right? I mean, they introduce these concepts in ways that they don't force you into it, and you just sort of discover it, and then you start using it. Um, and yeah, there was a whole lot more I wanted to do, right? I mean, as always, um, but but yeah, it came down to what what is the minimum amount we could get away with that would, like, really do what we needed it to do, and sell it. And I'll tell you, sorry, I'm going back to the previous question, but like that, that's always the hardest part, right? Is at the end when you've got a team of people who spent time on something, and they're like, no, we have to include this. Like, I spent all this
Yeah.
time on it, and then you sort of have to talk about the sunk cost fallacy, right? Of like, no, the end product is the end product. People aren't going to know this thing existed, right? The thing that you work on it, yes, you put a lot of work into that and it's amazing, but like, this product that we're putting out, right, this is all they're going to know. They don't know the work you put into it. And we will resurrect that stuff later, but we have to protect what that end product is, and that's the most important thing.
So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. The old, you can't ship the game with a designer um, vibe, right? And
Yeah, unfortunately, I got to wear those hats at different times. It's like, take off this hat, put on this hat.
Yeah.
I have to be shitty producer, man. Yeah.
So much good game design. I do have a note about level design, but I will just say that is really clever, and I love the way that that small space, even in its constraint in the beginning, felt big and magical and cool to explore. And I just really loved the way that it revealed itself in such a natural way. Um, a lot of times it's like, do this, get this, do this, big place opens up. And the way that you've constructed the world and the level design to do that, it's not dissimilar, but it's very like, it's just more subtle and engaging in a way where it doesn't feel very task oriented, even though a lot of times it is. But it just really kind of felt natural in that way. And I'm not sure if you have a lot to say about that, but I don't want to lose the thread about game design because I wanted to move that into animation.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think you're correct in that. I mean, it was it was a very conscious thing, and I am very much about revealing. I remember there was and new areas, and it's super awesome to hear you say that about those because you never know if it's gonna have the impact that you want it to. So I'm happy it did. But I just have vivid memories of games like one of the Final Fantasy games when I was a kid. I can't remember which one it was, but like, it's like you have a satisfying game, but you're like, oh, I'm so sad it's going to end. And then you get to the point where, oh no, now you go to the moon, right?
Yeah.
Like, and yet there's a whole other game on the moon, and then you reach that point, or maybe you go underground first and then you go to the moon. I can't remember, but this happened 2 times, and it was like it blew my mind both times that this happened, and I I'll never forget like the feeling that I had with those where I was sad that it was going to end, and then suddenly it didn't, and the whole thing opened up, and it's like surprise, there's so much more. And um, I mean, I don't think I achieved that level of surprise, but like that's what I kind of try to hold on to when I
I mean,
think
there's
about it.
definitely a form of it. There's definitely a form of it in there. The way it kind of just like keeps going in a very, I don't even know if I'm using the right word, soft and subtle, but mission accomplished there.
Cool.
And so before I move back into animation, I do want to say one other thing. Um, I see your VR work in your mechanics in your game. I see the teleportation mechanic. I see you. I see
Wait,
the
what?
way I see the way you did the VR teleportation mechanic with the precision jump. I just wanted to note that.
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. What?
So you've worked in VR, obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
as have I. The the traditional reticle based teleportation mechanic,
Oh, the movement.
the way it
Yes,
move,
yes,
the way
yes,
you
yes,
move the
yes, yes,
reticle
yes.
to select the precision jump. I just wanted to say I saw that.
Okay. I'm sure that there was something in there influencing that exact thing, but it's not something that was on the forefront of my brain. But you're right. You're right. It is.
It's pretty cool because you do have a few mechanics in the game that take things like that and make it. I guess the precision jump is a great example. Like it's also a very familiar way to throw grenades in games,
Right.
and just worked really nicely for that. Okay, so all of this is great, but all of it hinges on the cat,
Right.
and we got to talk about the cat. So this, I love this cat. I'm a dog person. Oh, he was just there, but I don't
Yeah,
know
I
where he
saw
is
him.
now. Um, but I have had cats. Um, so maybe I'm the perfect person to do this podcast because I really got into the cat. Um, really insane personality, just in the way it looks and the way it moves and the way the expression, like in its eyes. Like there's one time where when you get the cell phone in the construction yard, and it's like, okay, you can take some selfies, and I just like I I took the selfie and I moved it around and zoomed in on the cat, and I was just like, man, that is a very like expressive face and the eyes, and and then I started noticing like this cat's actually, in my opinion, somewhere between just having been a kitten and becoming a cat. Like it's like right in that. Am I off there? Is that right?
No, yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. So yeah, I'm glad that you picked up on that because I look there's this magical period between like super small kitten and adult cat where they're like it's like 3 to 5 weeks old where they're just still kitten-ish, but they're just sort of this lanky, slightly smaller adult, and that's kind of what I was hoping to get across there.
All right, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cat's got all these great animations from the way it walks, the way it crouches, the way it does zoomies, the jumping, the slow motion bird mechanic.
Hmm.
I mean, you've done a great job, Micah. Can you like I don't know where to even begin with that. It's such a huge part of what the game is, but incredibly integral, and game couldn't exist as it is without the work that you did. So, number one,
Thank you.
bravo. Number two, how'd you do it?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Tell us everything.
It was a process. I think. I didn't just jump on the project and start, you know, uh, just nailing it right out of the gate. I think there was definitely some back and forth. Matt gave me a lot of guidance with letting me know, like, hey, like we really want to go for something more clumsy. Um, we want something with a sense of humor. Um, I was kind of in the beginning going for this very like stoic sort of ultra smooth, graceful kind of take, and Matt was like, no, let's like make him a little clumsy. So that was helpful. That was good guidance. Definitely marked a turning point. And then I think from there, I just started approaching each assignment like, because again, we were also working on intrinsic reward and that kind of thing. So I just started approaching each assignment like, what can we do with this? Like, how can I make this an opportunity to be funny, or an opportunity to show that personality and that clumsiness? Um, and then I guess the other thing to say is like, I think any animator would agree, pose is king. So you got to have good poses, and they have to be clear. They have to be readable. They have to be iconic. So when you see that pose, you're like, that's a cat. Like it immediately reminds you of a behavior you would see in real life. And so to achieve that, it was just kind of a mix of studying a lot of reference. We looked at a lot of cat videos. Always we were looking at reference.
Sounds like the
Um,
worst part of the job.
it's my
Uh,
favorite.
uh,
I love watching animals move. It's like that's like my whole thing. I love it so much. I will sit there and I'll just like frame by frame, going forward, going backward, going forward, going backward, and just being like, oh wow, look at this muscle contract. Look at how the pelvis has to come down so that the chest can go up. I'm always just like looking at these little things, and I just love like the locomotion of animals. It's just so complex, but when you find a way to replicate it, it's so satisfying. That's my favorite part of the job, actually. Um, so it's just looking at reference and then going, okay, we have this slightly cartoony design, so let's push it, let's exaggerate it, let's make the poses even bigger, even simpler. Um, and it was just an iterative process of taking that mindset to everything we tried to do, and yeah, hopefully the result came through. So
Yeah, no, it did. I'll go back to the pouncing on the bird slow motion mechanic thing. Like, there's so much goofiness in that with when it's happening. It takes an overlong but perfect time to do it, where you're just like moving the cat around and bending the cat, and it's just like it's really fun, and that really kind of that playful character and animation stuff is really in there. Were there any times when you were making this that you were like animation wise stymied by a design choice or an environment choice that made you have to switch up how you were normally thinking about it and maybe got to a better result?
yes. I come from my background before games was like all you have is like the camera, right? So you have this frame and then you can do whatever you want, like animating within that frame. Literally just go nuts, do whatever you want. So coming into games, there's a lot of constraints. You've got like I mean, timing is a big one because you're going to mess up the game feel if, you know, you press the button and the input isn't responding as fast as you want and stuff like that. And I hated that. So,
I sped up some of your animations, Mike. I'm sorry.
I know. I've been finding them. I've been like, oh, it's at 1.5 speed. How dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of constraints. Like timing is a big one. And then there's also just like making sure that you can get from one state of movement to another state of movement and have that look okay. Which I don't really think, hot take incoming, I don't really think any game does super well. I mean, games have their own standards for what good animation looks like because they have so much constraints. Whereas, like, you know, if you look at feature films, when they don't have those constraints, the animation can just be, you know, the star of the show. So
I want to interject here real quick because
go ahead.
This is one of these things that I really appreciate, and it goes back to hiring somebody that's not just in games. Is that Micah will beat my ass and get on my butt about something that I'm completely okay with because it's like acceptable within games, and she's like, no, this is horrible. You need to like this. I don't like this at all. You need to make this better. I'm like, okay, Micah. Yeah, no, a bit, but like I am so appreciative of that happening every single time. And
yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not saying that like, oh, game animators are worse. They're honestly so incredible, and there's so many that are so much better than me. It's insane. But I'm just saying that like games have a different standard than some of the other mediums where you'd find animation. And it's just comes with those technical limitations. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what for you is the high water mark for game animation?
You're talking about like a specific game
just personally,
that I love, or
like
personally?
Yeah, like
that's a really good question. I think I think for me it's really coming together when you aren't noticing the blending very much. When that's kind of when you can maintain the sort of good response time and the game feels nice, but the blending is very easy on the eyes. I think Nintendo does a pretty great job with a lot of their big IPs. Matt, you already mentioned Mario Odyssey, so I'll mention it again. That game has amazing animation.
Yeah.
Because not only is it just so responsive, it's so fun to play. You know, when you're like stacking those high jumps and stuff like that, it feels so good, but it also just looks incredible. Those transitions in between states are almost like indiscernible. I would definitely say that's yeah. And
yeah, you
honestly,
got to hit that
of
sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's about like working within the limitations and kind of accepting them, which is something I had to learn because I fight the limitations a lot. So.
I mean, for good reason, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want it to look good, you know? That's
yeah.
Limitations are great though. And any good creative person working within limitations will always find the way. It's you know, that's how you get the good stuff.
100% agree. Yeah.
Yeah, when you can just do anything. Actually, I'm going to stop myself there because I'm going to get myself in trouble. Okay, so a couple other things that I loved in the game. It was so like warm and funny in ways that were like really cool. Like the characters are really well defined. My favorite character is the lizard. I mean, it's just so absurd and unhinged and weird, but again, absolutely perfectly tied to a game mechanic and a system and a quest. So again, a great example of nothing outside of what is needed, but also intrinsically additive just by existing. So really cool. I mean, the writing for that character in particular was like probably my favorite of the whole game. Just really funny, really like fun finding that guy, you know, around and just the oh, well, I'm really terrible at this is very funny. Um, Also, the NPCs were really interesting. I've read a little bit about you talking about them, but like, I really was like taken in by the no face thing. Um, I totally get that, and I've read some stuff about you talking about that. I wonder, like, it's just so interesting because, like, I see a lot of, maybe it's just me, society commentary in the people, faceless people walking around their day and, worried about their smartphones and their donut and whatever, whatever they have. Is that a thing, or is that just, me?
I mean, I think it is. It's funny though because there's a lot of stuff that came about, and I I don't know how much like I'm I don't know how much I actively talk about this as like as a social commentary. It's more just observation from my point of view, and personal
Mm.
experience. Like the whole phone thing, I think it's definitely a personal thing for me as well. I mean, my wife definitely complains that I'm on the phone too much, which I'm sure everybody has those situations. And using that in the game where when people are distracted, the it's an obvious opportunity for the player to do something to them. It just seemed really it fit really well. But yeah, there's a lot of personal stuff in there. I mean, Duck Dad. I'm a dad. I've got 3 kids, right? And the Duck Dad stuff. I'm not that bad, but like, there's a lot of like, wouldn't it be funny if, because I have this personal experience of like, these, being terrified. I've never lost my kids, thankfully, but having complete anxiety and terror around the idea of that happening.
Always,
If we ever go
always,
to
every second of the
someplace,
day.
yeah, um, and so a lot of these characters did come from sort of an angle of either they were driven by some mechanic that I thought would be really interesting to develop, or some personal experience, or a combination of both. And then when I hired Pip and she started working on the project, Philippa War, I mean, she just took all of the things I wanted to do and dialed it to 20. Like the chameleon was, it was like, wouldn't it be funny, right, if there was a character that like you had to go find and he thought he was invisible but he wasn't, right? Like, it's just like, haha, that would be really funny. And then but taking that concept and then turning it into an actual character, that's what it ended up being, right? Like, that's a really difficult thing to do, and she's really good at that.
Narrator,
So
it was funny. It was definitely funny. I also loved like the idea that, like, when I forget what character it was, but somebody was saying to the cat, what you don't know about email? Like, that was so funny
oh
to me. That was
yeah,
just like hilarious.
yeah.
Uh,
This was the this was an interesting bit of development too, because like I was very much on the fence of, I want this world to live in the cat's world, right? I want this world to be in animal world, right? And 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 I'm so glad that it went this way. But like, Pip kept pushing for like, well, what if the beetle had a phone and was like on social media, and like just sort of pushing into this human world more and more and more. And it just reached a point where it was just so funny and ridiculous that it's like, okay, fine, we can't not do this. It's just so good. Um, but it was a constant struggle back and forth of like how much human anthropomorphic behavior is going to go too far, right? Like, where's that line where it feels like it's not a cat anymore, or not an
yeah,
animal?
that's interesting because I had a moment when I finally got access to the laundromat,
Mm-hmm.
and I went in there and I'm like, of course you do what any, you know, you assess the room. Okay, I see a button. There's some laundry detergent and next to an open thing, and the dryer's open. Like, what kind of puzzle am I going to be dealing with here? And just not, like,
Right.
not doing it. That was
Yeah.
really, that was actually really surprising to me. Like I was like, or maybe there is a puzzle there and I missed it. I don't know. I haven't finished the game yet, but it was just like, oh, I just went over and I playfully knocked the soap into the machine, and that was it. It's just like a cool thing being in the cat's world, like, and not having it be like this grand puzzle that opens a door somewhere, or unlocks a quest or something like that. And I think that's the kind of restraint in design that I keep referring to in the game.
Yeah, and that was a difficult thing for me to actually maintain that restraint as well, because like I do love designing puzzles, like they're really fun. And I mentioned this in other interviews, but like working on Portal 2 was the most fun I had on any project at Valve. And we did a lot of design on a lot of those puzzles, and it's like I love doing that. But
Can I just take a moment to say something about Portal 2?
Yeah.
Portal 2 is the only game I've ever played together all the way through with my wife, and it was such a magic thing. I mean, we still talk about it. It was when it came out. I mean, having someone who doesn't play games she's not a gamer, and pick that game up and play it all the way through was like, it was such a great thing. And also, it's probably maybe the best puzzle game ever made. So you got that going for you too.
I work with some really amazing people on that project too. But like that project was transformative for me in that way, where we did play tests, multiple times a week. And the play testers we brought in were, friends and friends of friends, and, people local, we signed up, whatever. But the pairings of the people playtesting, it was something that I was never familiar with, coming from working on Half-Life and Left 4 Dead and Counter-Strike, where these were mother and son, the two sisters, son and daughter. It was like the pairings were, for me, different, unique, right? Like it was something where like, wow, this is awesome. And so that was a goal for us, to make sure that like all of these folks that were paired together were having a good time, which meant, not just different backgrounds and perspectives, but also different levels of experience, right? Not just with the game, but first person games or puzzle games, right? We wanted to make sure that like we were able to support these different things, these different levels. And that was, I don't know, that was really, it was a thing for me that I guess I started to really, I don't know, appreciate, I guess, or just, it became a lot more enjoyable to think about making a game that could appeal to people who were just doing it for enjoyment. And I'm not sure. I'm still sort of processing this whole thing, but like there was definitely an aspect of that when making Little Kitty, where I wanted like parents to sit with their kids and play, right? I wanted, different ages and different backgrounds of people. I wanted everybody to just, make something that everybody could enjoy. And, there aren't enough games that I could play with my kids. So like, not just like co-op, but actually like co-play, right? It's something that people don't talk about a lot,
Yeah. Nobody talks about it ever, but this game had the perfect couch co-play experience at my house. My wife and my daughter kept like, sitting down on the couch for just a minute, but 20 minutes later, they're still,
Yeah.
It was a very, very, very communal game experience. Like I said, it was a dark day, and we all needed it. So.
I'm glad I was able to provide that. Yeah. But as a result, like the puzzles, I do like designing puzzles, but I think I wanted to make sure that what we were making was something that wasn't, it wasn't, you weren't going to have, I wouldn't have to worry about playing with my 6-year-olds on the couch and them driving, and then suddenly get to the point where they're stuck, right? Like it wasn't an important part of the game, right? Like making this a challenging and interesting and deep puzzle, to me, did not add any more value to the game, right? It's like this needed to be unique and interesting in some way, but it didn't have, like, I don't want people to be stuck at it. It's not important, you know. Like there's always this aspect of puzzle design where, you know, the best puzzles are the ones where people reach their lowest before they solve it. Meaning, you know, like your biggest highs usually come after your lowest lows, right? Like just behaviorally. So, so using that in puzzle design, you know, you say, well, you want people to get to the point where they're about to give up, and then they solve it, right? Which is super duper hard to do. Um, but that's not. I'm mentioning it because that's exactly what I didn't want to do in this game, right? I didn't want people to ever get to the point where they were like going to give up on a puzzle or anything.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, just as a general comment about puzzle design, um, you mentioned, you know, just now the lowest low before the highest high. It seems like that I really enjoy that because I find myself, you know, in low points of despair a lot of times in puzzles before having that moment. I think the other interesting type of puzzle design is where, and this happened almost all. I never had the pit of despair playing any of the Portal games, but I had this other thing where it was like, you know, I'm invincible. I can see 3 moves ahead of myself, and it's just like it's going and going and going, and yeah, I did it. Like it seems like those are two types of puzzle design that are incredibly hard to do.
right. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things. I learned a lot of lessons with Portal 2 as well, working on it, because that's, you know, that's the hardest I've pushed myself in as far as puzzle design. And there's a lot of rules that we discovered along the way, you know, and you know, there's, you sort of, as you work on it, you break down puzzles into these different segments of like, you know, there's the actual, you know, introduction to the puzzle, and then there's like, you know, teaching people the rules of the puzzle, and then there's like, you know, hinting at solutions of the puzzle, and all that stuff, and then at the end there's like the execution, right? And um, I see a lot of puzzle design that frustrates me to no end. So I also do a lot of escape rooms these days, and this is big in this environment, and I hate it so much. Is that like when people will design something where they get to the point where, okay, I know exactly what I have to do, but it's going to take me 10 minutes to do it, or I have to do like 10 moves to do it, or just like there's
Yep,
some amount, like you've
that
just lost
sucks.
them. That's it. You fucked up the
Yeah,
puzzle, right? That's
yeah,
a bad puzzle design. You know, conversely, right? Like if well, I guess like the other example is just when it's too easy, right? But that's just sort of a mismatch in player expectations. I mean, the best puzzles are ones where you're able to teach the player during the process of what it is that they should be doing, right? And then, you know, you teach them some tools, and then you just leave out the last part, right? And you let them come to that conclusion, um, and then that's where people are going to enjoy themselves the most, right? When they figure it out. Obviously, it's like the whole point of a puzzle is to let players feel smart, right?
yep,
You want them to feel smart about what they're doing. But I mean, Little Kitty, it wasn't so much about that. They were very light. You know, there's a couple cases where it's like, oh, I need to go know where to go, and then just to get there. But it was all very much, um, you know, we want it to be a fun thing that you did, and not so much a challenging puzzle to execute or
yeah. And I
anything.
think kind of the absence of those kind of things, or sorry, the scarcity of those kind of things, really made those very light puzzles feel good and meaningful and a nice um, reward for what you're doing. So really well done. Um, I wanted to spend the last little bit here talking about the biz,
Mm-hmm.
the game industry biz. And so you've made this game pretty much universally critically acclaimed. People love it. It's doing well. So little Little Kitty Big City is a thing now. And is it just a thing or is it more things? Right? The eternal question. I am personally a person who I do not like sequels.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you not to make a sequel, but like I just like the idea of we made this thing, it's awesome, it stands alone, and we're going to use our business muscles now to do something else instead of doing more of that.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with sequels. Like, you know, some of the best things in the world are sequels. But where do you guys stand on all that? Like, you know, did it come out the way you wanted to, and do you want to do more? Do you want to leave it? Where do you sit?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of stuff that we didn't get to ship, meaning like there's a lot of ideas that were left on the floor, a lot of half-made things that didn't quite work out or whatever. So, so there's still a lot of life in it for me as far as like interesting things that I think people would enjoy. So there's that part of it. Because if we put out a game and said like, this is all we have to say, you know, we're done talking, this is it, that's the complete product, right? Then that's fine, that would be great. But I do recognize that because of the way we designed it, so it was there was a lot there, but it was, you know, I was hoping to design it in a way that nothing felt extraneous, right? Like we've talked about, and nothing felt like overly time consuming to do. And then, because if you can do that and you add more value per time people are playing, then hopefully you get to the point where they're done and they say they want more, right? Like that whole Final Fantasy experience I had. Because you want people to feel like, I think they want more stuff at the end rather than saying, God, I'm done. When am I going to finish this thing, right? So that's what I was hoping for, and I know that a lot of players have experienced that, and so they want more, right? I get, for the first time in my career, I'm just getting emails from people just saying how much they like the game and how much more they want to play, and like I've never gotten that before. It's crazy. It's amazing. So there's definitely a desire from our team. Well, I don't want to speak for them, honestly, but there's definitely a desire for me to do more stuff because, honestly, I've got no end of things that I want to do. It's just time is always the biggest constraint. So I want to move on to stuff. Micah and I have talked about stuff, fun things that we'd love to do that's not Little Kitty related. So I'd love to do more different stuff. But I think at the same time, there's still, I think people would enjoy a little bit more Little Kitty. Whether we do a sequel, no idea. I don't know. Right now, it's not even on the table. We're not even talking about it. But DLC is on the table because I think there's some fun stuff that we still want to do. But I always thought about it like this. Like, I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody once told me that like Steven Spielberg, he would stagger his projects. One for the audience and then one for himself. Right? I don't know if you ever heard that, but like,
sure,
it's like, here's one that's going to make money, and then here's one that I'm going to do for myself, right? And while I don't think that I'm planning to do that, like, to me, having a game that's commercially successful as the first one, I think does allow you to do well. I don't think I'll ever allow myself to do something that I don't think is going to be commercially successful, but at the same time, I think it'll allow us to take more risks and do more interesting things. So hopefully that's what we will do next. I don't know. Micah, what do you feel about it?
I think we haven't talked too much about future stuff, but when we have, I think the one thing we're kind of discussing is just doing something drastically different, just for the hell of it. Like, we have this like cozy Little Kitty Big City. What if we did something crazy, messed up, and violent? I don't know. There's absolutely no.
Wait a minute.
No reason to believe that's actually what we're gonna do, but it's something that we definitely joked about. Yeah.
So it is a concern, though, of what we do next.
In terms of brand, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's something that I I've talked with people about. I'm like, what if the next game we do is just it's a more of an adult game? Like, how does that dilute our brand? I don't know. Everybody I've
Yeah.
talked to said like, don't worry about it. So maybe I'm not going to worry about it. We'll see.
Well, the good news for everyone is that you guys found each other and made something magical together, and you're still going to keep doing stuff together.
Hope so, Micah. Yeah.
Yes, I'm on board.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
You heard it here.
You definitely heard it here. Okay, guys, this was super fun for me. I really enjoyed the game, and Micah, it was so cool that you joined up. It was a really fun conversation. I hope more people get to play your game. I really liked it a lot. It's very unique, very different than what I thought it was going to be. Um, I don't actually like watch trailers or follow up on stuff. I just I get the game and I play it, and I didn't really know what it was going to be, and it's definitely surprised at every turn, in a delightful way. Also, the music was great. Let's just say that. Um, Anything you guys want to say to your fans?
I mean, I've been. I think all of us have been blown away by the reception of the game and how many different people have played it that I didn't even expect would be interested in playing it. And yeah, I'm so very thankful that people are enjoying it, and because yeah, I mean we'll keep making more stuff. Hopefully, that people will enjoy making or enjoy playing. And yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really, really fun conversation. Hope everyone enjoys listening to this as much as I had doing it with you. Thanks so much.
I
Thank
had
you so
fun.
much for
Thank you,
having
Adam.
me. Thank you.
Thank you.